Coming up on this special bonus episode of the podcast, we go behind the scenes of our book, The Hockey Player's Heart.
Welcome to the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for readers and writers of gay romance fiction. If you can read it, write it, watch it, or listen to it, these two guys are going to talk about it. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus.
Welcome, everyone, to this special bonus episode of the Big Gay Fiction Podcast.
I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com.
And as always, I'm Will from WillKnaus.com.
So over the past few days, we've actually been doing some Facebook Live discussions about our book, The Hockey Player's Heart. We've talked about various aspects of the book, and we thought you guys might like to hear that if you've missed it or didn't catch all the pieces of it. Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy doing our 7 days of live broadcast?
7 days of live! Coming at you live! Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was sometimes hard coming up with so many different topics, but I think we had fun, and I think everyone listening will hopefully enjoy some of the things we discussed this past week.
Yeah, it was some various different parts of how we did our process and different elements of the book. So we hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back for a regular podcast episode next Monday. And we are here to talk about our first collaborative project, The Hockey Player's Heart, which comes out on next Tuesday, January 16th, from Dreamspinner Press. As you can see, it's a Dreamspun Desire book. It's actually book number 50, which is kind of cool to be in that kind of milestone positioning for the line.
Milestone.
Yes. So we're going to talk over the next week about the book as we get ready for the launch. And for tonight's topic, we're going to focus on this guy right here. The hockey.
Me? Little me?
Yes, little old you. This is his first book.
Yep.
Now, in the past, you have published some short stories about a decade ago.
Yep.
But this is your first book. Mm-hmm. What was it like getting your first book out there in the world and now getting to hold it in your hand?
What a fantastic question. Thank you for asking.
You're so welcome.
So what's it like having my first book out in the world?
Yeah. He knew this question was coming too.
I knew it was coming. So my thoughts on this are that I don't have a particular emotional attachment to the book itself. So let me explain. We are subscribers to the Dreamspun Desires line, and like everyone else who subscribes to the Dreamspun Desires line, we got this book in the mail the last week of December. Mm-hmm. And we did a pretty crappy unboxing video. Don't look it up online, because it's pretty crappy as unboxing.
Right here on Facebook, just saying.
It's terrible as unboxing videos go. And there are certain people who get all weepy and emotional about a milestone of seeing their book in print for the first time. And that didn't happen for me.
Interesting.
I think it's because I feel I'm detached from the this is not going to make any sense. I'm so sorry, everyone. While I may not be emotionally attached to the physical book itself, although I think it's absolutely lovely. It's really beautiful, and I can appreciate it from an aesthetic point. It's got a gorgeous cover, and it's beautiful on the inside, too. All of the Dreamspuns are. What I appreciate and what I emotionally connect to, specifically with this first book in the series that we're writing, is the characters. I think we have spent so much time with them. I mean, I know they're not real, but we've spent so much time thinking about and concentrating on who they are as people, and what are their goals and their dreams and their aspirations, and what are their passions, that concentrating on these fictional people for such an extended period of time has made them real in my mind. Mm-hmm. So, as you can see on this paperback, there are lots of little flags. The other day we were going through the book looking for cute little excerpts to pull for the blog tour that's going to be happening
starting on Friday
in the next couple of days. And I was sitting down and I was flipping through the book, and I was like, oh yeah, that was cute when they did that. And it's like, oh, I remember that too. And so yeah, I think what is most memorable and momentous about this first book for me is the people that we've created out of our imaginations.
And we should tell you, if you haven't seen some of our promotional stuff already, A Hockey Player's Heart is a second chance romance between NHL hockey superstar Caleb Carter, who has returned home to his upstate New York hometown to recuperate from an injury. And while he's there, he reconnects with Erin Price, who's now a third grade school teacher. But years ago, when they were both in high school, Erin was actually Caleb's tutor for geometry. And they harbored a crush on each other that neither one of them knew about at the time, because neither one of them was out. Years later now, they're getting their second chance at making all this work for them.
Yeah.
Now, us writing A Dreamspun Desire was your idea back at the time. We knew we wanted to collaborate on something, but doing a Dreamspun was like all yours. Why a Dreamspun?
I think there are a lot of different subgenres in gay fiction, and I have just been drawn towards simple, classic stories that primarily deal with classic romance tropes. I think it has been a very difficult last couple of years for a lot of people for, obvious reasons. So I have found that my comfort reads are feel-good contemporary romances. And when Dreamspinner came out with this particular line of books that specialized in, feel-good, tropey romances from yesteryear, that's the word I meant. It was like I was 100% on board as a reader and as a writer. It was like, that's what I want to be doing. So that's why I said, this is something we need to sign up for.
Yeah, because as soon as the subscriptions were available, we were like, click, click, click. Get those for us.
Yeah.
How do you feel? And we'll get more into this in tomorrow's video about process. But what was it like for you to start this creative process and really generate your first book and know you had a completed story at the end of it?
I think that we are still working through our collaborative process. While I'm happy with the end result of The Hockey Player's Heart, I think the collaborative process could have gone smoother. All of the bumps in the road that we experienced were my fault. So I don't play well with others. I'm going to put that out there in the world right now. So I need to work on my half of the collaborative process. And that's something that we're still working on at the moment.
Yeah, we're actually, as this book comes out, we're finishing the first draft on its sequel, which we'll talk later on in the video series and in the blog tour about a little bit too. So our collaboration survived the first book, which is
yes, it did.
Awesome.
We're still married. Everything worked out fine.
What would you like to tell the good peeps about the book? Why do they need to go get that?
'Cause it's good. I don't know. I'm pulled toward this series of of stories just because they're feel good. I think some people would categorize them as fluffy or light, and they kind of mean that in a derogatory way. But I don't see them that way. I want my entertainment to make me feel good, and I want them to be uplifting, and that's what the Dreamspun Desires line is all about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I branch off all the time to read more angsty stuff. But I like coming back to the Dreamspun Desires because they are light and fluffy, and you know the HEA is coming there. That's not a spoiler, or at least the HFN. For these guys, it's totally HEA, and it's a nice thing to sit down and just have a nice read too.
Yeah.
So tonight we wanted to talk to you a little bit about the co-writing process. This was your first book in general, as we talked about last night. But for both of us, it was our first time to co-write together. Will's helped me out over the years with almost every story that I've published, especially in the gay romance genre. He kind of stepped away from my young adult stuff, but all of my romance stuff, you've read, you've beta read, you've helped me edit, improve, etc. But this was something that we started from the very get-go together. And it really started with the plotting. Initially, with the Dreamspuns, you have to pitch Dreamspinner. So we had to sit down and really think about the stories that we wanted to tell for this trilogy of books that's in the Hockey Heart series. The tropes, the characters, and how all that built up. And I think you were kind of the driving force behind a lot of that, because you're kind of our romance trope, like, guru, if you will. Did you have a particular thing in mind when it was like, here, we want to do 3 stories and where that was going to go?
Yes, I knew that, first was the idea that we wanted to co-write together, and that this was the category line that we were going to do it with. So I was at least enamored with the idea of doing a loosely connected trilogy. And I don't remember why exactly, but I had the idea of a wedding being the sort of thematic glue that connected the 3 different stories together. So the Hockey Player's Heart features Caleb and Aaron. And there's no spoiler here, they do get their happy ending in this book. There is a proposal at the end of this book
to drive that HEA home. We were initially.
So yes, theirs is the wedding that we are talking about for this particular series.
Yeah, the series for a while was called The Wedding of the Year, and it was going to feature this first book was getting these 2 together. The second book that we're actually working on right now happens at their wedding and features their best friend Dimitri, who does get his second book. Some people have already asked about that who've read this already. And then the third book, we see Caleb and Aaron on their honeymoon, and another couple will take center stage.
Yes.
In that book. So that's kind of where that came from. And then came the nitty-gritty of figuring out what happens in this book and who these characters were. And the first thing we did was we came up with Caleb and Aaron and who they were, and a little loosey-goosey about what their journey was to get to this happy ending, and then really drilling down into it some more, like what happens in each chapter. And that was one of the coolest things to me about our co-writing process overall, was those afternoons in front of the whiteboard. After I was done with the day job, sitting down in front of the whiteboard to figure out chapter by chapter what their journey was. I don't know why that was my favorite part, because sometimes plotting still stresses me out, since I started in this as a pantser years ago. But that was fun, batting the ideas around and writing it all down and then figuring out kind of how to do it. And the tricky thing in our writing relationship, I guess it's tricky, it might be tricky, it feels tricky sometimes, is we do the overall plotting, and then I go away and really generate the bulk of the first draft. Over my writing which is 6 years now, maybe. I've kind of gotten into this rhythm of being able to sit down and knock out sprints of words. And so it's essentially what you call a fast draft. And it's even faster now that I've discovered dictation, which I wasn't doing when we wrote this book. And so I fast draft the first draft of things, and then I pass it over to you. Mm-hmm. And you put magic all over it. It's true. What was it like for you, like cleaning up taking over after the first draft? So you're in the plot, and then I go away, and then I get to noodle around inside the loose points that we do.
How far do you want to drill down with this? As
far as you want to tell the good folks that in like 10 minutes, over our 10-minute time frame here that we're trying to keep to.
So yes, I agree with Jeff that sitting down at the whiteboard and sort of brainstorming the sort of character arc and romantic journey of our two heroes was my favorite part. So we came up with the essential story beats of how we got from point A to point B, where the story was concerned. But unfortunately, we left specifics about what was going on in each chapter a little bit vague.
That's where my pantser self got to have some fun, for better or worse.
Yeah, so Jeff had to come up with an awful lot of stuff on the fly. And so once we started drilling down and editing and kind of looking at how the story was working, there were portions of it that just weren't gelling and I don't know, they just weren't working. So what we ended up doing is we held on to that draft, and this past spring we were at RT, and we spent 2 days doing a workshop with Cherry Adair. Mm-hmm. The first day we spent with Cherry, she sort of went over her post-it plotting method, which is essentially outlining and doing the story beats for a book using different colored Post-its. And then the second day was basically a trial by fire, where Sherry just throws out absolutely everything she knows about craft at you, and you just take as many notes as you possibly can. Also, what was actually really wonderful about that 2 days is that you get to sign up for a one-on-one session with Cherry. And you get to talk about whatever project that you're working on. And we sat down and talked to Cherry about this book. And essentially, we just sat there in the lobby of the hotel in Atlanta, and we just brainstormed and bulldozed through some of the problems that we were encountering with this first draft. So when we got home, we had an idea of the direction that we wanted to head with this particular story, and what things needed to be fixed. So once we kind of had an idea, a revised outline essentially, we could move forward with a lot more confidence. Yeah. It's like, hey, we actually know what we're doing now. This is going to be an even better story.
And that's why Cherry is actually called out in the acknowledgments for this book. And I think it's a safe thing to say that Chapter 26 exists because of Cherry and the brainstorming that we did with her. It's all over the book, but Chapter 26 in particular, the ending that we got came out of that class and working with her that afternoon in the lobby of the whatever hotel that was in Atlanta that we were in. Mm-hmm. And it's that stuff has all carried over now as we've worked on the second book. Yeah. We still did the whiteboard stuff because that initial throwing stuff up on the whiteboard and moving it around a little bit is really useful for the first wave. But then the whole second book had the Post-it note plotting down, and when I was doing the fast drafting this time, I knew more of the beats we were trying to hit in each chapter. And so far, as you've been going through it, you've been The book's in a much better state for where we are now than our first one was, because our collaboration process has improved.
Yes.
Very much so. So that's kind of the lowdown for tonight's broadcast, unless there's anything else you want to throw out about that, our process.
No, it's just it's a continually evolving process, and we're going to perfect it one of these days.
It'll get better for the third book. It's already better for the second.
Yes.
So for tonight's topic, we thought we would talk about populating our book with out and proud characters. When we were thinking about the book in our original plottings, did we do that deliberately, or did it turn out that way?
It was deliberate. It was a deliberate choice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think we said it. I think we just did it. I think we write very much in the realm of designing the world the way we want it to be, if only a little bit. And certainly with Caleb, he's out and proud and has been in the NHL as an out player since he was drafted into the league. He came out at some point in college, which is not really covered in the book. I think it's like one sentence that's mentioned somewhere. But he's always been out in the NHL, has never hidden it. His best friend, Dmitry Stanislav, who you meet in the book, is also an out New York Ranger. And pretty much in our vision, probably most of the teams have at least one out player or somebody on staff who is out. For Aaron, he's also out as a school teacher. He was out. He also came out in college. And so here are two pretty strong role models for Aaron with the students he teaches. Obviously, he's not going to tell third graders about that, but they can see this representation. And for Caleb in particular, he takes his role model status, I think, fairly seriously in his help with young people and taking the time out to talk to kids. What's your impression of how we populated our book?
I don't think it was. Here's the thing. I'm trying to come up with a way to say this without sounding like a total asshole, but I am not particularly interested, especially when it comes to category romance. I'm not interested in exploring angsty coming out stories. And I don't want issues of the closet or homophobia to be issues that our characters deal with. I want I want the world in which our characters live to be an ideal one. So that means that the fact that Caleb is out and proud gay sports celebrity, it's a non-issue. It's not an issue for anybody at all, at no point. And it shouldn't be.
Well, exactly. I mean, but we do have a touch of the current world in the book as well, because there is a scene where Caleb is met by a young man who's in high school and is closeted and is afraid to come out, and they have an exchange that happens after one of Caleb's games. So that plays into him being the role model as well. So we haven't created, utopia, but certainly for our primary characters, as you said, I've written one coming out story and I don't really want to ever do another one because one was enough. And I like the idea that we've got this universe that we've created for these categories where homophobia is really not an issue, as you said, because, it's the way we want the world to be. And hopefully we bring forward enough of these stories, because certainly the category romances, and we'll talk about this a little bit more tomorrow when it's Category Romance Day, really is the feel-good, bring forward very little angst. People get the roadblocks to their HEAs in other ways than this way. And for these two, it's just trying to blend together celebrity and non-celebrity, and Aaron does have a little bit of baggage as well. So Yeah, it's definitely nice to have that kind of feel-good thing.
Yeah.
And tonight we're going to talk about something near and dear to our hearts, category romance. Mm-hmm. We love our category romance. We talked a little bit about this back on day one when we talked about kind of the origin of putting all the book together. Mm-hmm. You have the longer history with category, as you mentioned, because you picked up those Blaze books from Harlequin years ago. What about category got you pulled into Blaze all those years ago?
Those many years ago.
It was many years ago, because we've been together for 20 plus years. Everything is like long time ago.
A long, long time ago. First, for the sake of definitions, a category romance is typically a line of books, usually centered around a specific theme. And when anyone mentions category length, they usually mean shorter novels, and most books within a specific category line are all identical length. So each book is a uniform reader experience. Mm-hmm. And the idea of, I don't know if it was necessarily invented by Harlequin back in the day, but they certainly exploited it to its fullest potential. Mm-hmm. Category lines, as I mentioned, are usually centered around a certain theme. That way, readers can pick a certain line and read those books and enjoy the specific tropes associated with that certain theme. In the past, there have been, the classic one is Harlequin Presents. Those are short, very steamy, but not necessarily graphic books that take place in exotic locales all over the world. A lot of the chic books come from Harlequin Presents. There are a lot of billionaire CEOs in those specific books. So those readers who read Harlequin Presents have a certain itch that they're trying to scratch when they read that line. Harlequin Blaze came around, I believe it was in the year 2000, and they were looking to fill the niche that was emerging at that time. Titles were getting a lot sexier, and that's what Blaze was doing. They were giving you the hottest possible romances you can get in a category line. The very first Harlequin Blaze I read was by Vicki Lewis Thompson, a remarkable author. Lord have mercy, she's written a bazillion books. All of them are really great. She's so talented. I'm really glad I picked up that first Blaze book all those years ago. I've enjoyed a lot of category romances since then. Mm-hmm.
Not the least of which have been the Dreamspun Desires books from Dreamspinner.
Exactly. Which is, I was so thrilled when Dreamspinner Press announced that they were doing a category romance line. Because deep in my heart, they make me so very, very happy. And I think, like with traditional category romances, the Dreamspun Desires line basically gives you a promise that you're going to get a specific reading experience every time you pick up one of their titles. They're all roughly the same length, and they all have feel-good themes, and they're, of course, all going to, end with a happily ever after. So yeah, that's category romance.
Yeah, and you got me into them even with the Blaze books. I didn't devour as many Blaze books as you did, but I definitely read them. And even, I was a big fan when Dreamspinner brought up this line too, because while I'm happy to go through hell and back for a romance, I also really like these kind of comforty reads. It's the same thing that puts me in front of the TV most weekends if Hallmark Channel has a new movie on, especially the Christmas movies, because the Christmas movies are all basically category romance movies, facing different tropes and a different, we must save the thing, the town, the bakery, the parade, the pumpkin patch, whatever it is. We don't have anybody saving anything in this book. But, maybe later in our writings we'll come up with something.
I'm sure we'll
to
say
save.
something eventually.
But I really like those things where you sit down and yes, you know where it's going. And you may not know exactly how they're going to get there, but on the other side of it that the two people in play are going to come together and will have their happy moment. And I really enjoy that both in books and in my movies occasionally too, because the world's crazy enough out there. And sometimes you need to put the angst aside and just get wrapped in a nice, warm, cozy blanket of a read. So for tonight, we wanted to talk about short reads versus epic length. Certainly category romances, as we talked about last night, tend to be on the shorter side.
Yep.
In that kind of 50,000 word kind of space, maybe 60, but I know Dreamspinner tends to stay in more of in that 50 to 55 kind of realm for the Dreamspuns. You have a very distinct opinion about short versus epic. What attracts you so much to the shorter read?
Well, first of all, let me say there are certain things that I do appreciate that are long and thick. But not my books. Generally speaking, no, that's not how I feel. That's just my personal preference. Some people want a 100,000 word tome or something that is 1,000 pages long, like the last Harry Potter book or something like that, and they want to dive into a world and kind of become immersed in something incredibly epic. Yeah, epic. I sort of have the reverse view. I want to get in right away. I want to understand who these characters are and what their goals are. If it's a romance, they're like always working towards a happily ever after. And I want them to get the show on the road. I don't want to be messing around for 300, 400 pages till they find themselves and go on the hero's journey or something like that. I don't have time for that. I would rather read 3 or 4 good, satisfying, feel-good romances instead of a single epic fantasy or something like that.
Or even a longer romance.
True.
In some cases,
True.
I guess. Yeah.
Now, there are some authors who write in our genre who do write longer, and that's perfectly okay because there are readers who prefer that. Jeff will dig into a big hunkin' tome of a book. I would most likely give it a side eye, and but if you recommend it, or if it's got some interesting buzz, or if it's an author that I'm interested in, I will tackle a longer work.
I think for you too, at least in the history of having watched you go try to tackle bigger books, it's all about pacing.
Oh God,
at that
yes.
point.
Oh God,
it's got to feel like it's moving along. You're not going to hang out for like a drawn out event.
No, I'm not.
Now I am more good. More better. More better. I'm okay with the longer drawn out, and maybe it's because I read a lot of sci-fi as a kid. Because most sci-fi does go far more towards the 100K length of a book, or even more recently, as you noted, the last Harry Potter books were quite long. Stephen King's Under the Dome, which is a huge favorite, was a quite long book. It really made me happy to have a Kindle. It's one of the first long books I read on a Kindle. It's like, I'm not hauling this brick around with me. Because I like that authors will occasionally take the time to develop everything out and to give the character space. I mean, I've done a couple books that were in the 80,000 word realm with a couple of hat trick books that got really long. You also have a thing about even long chapters in some cases. Mm-hmm. You want your chapters to be. Do you have a sense on how long you like your chapters?
They need to be long enough.
That's fair. That's fair, because I know there's been books where it's like, this chapter never stops. It just goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah. Like you just said, it is about pacing. Mm-hmm. There are some authors who have incredibly long chapters. There are certain authors who, for whatever reason, have no chapters at all. As much as I love Gordon Merrick, he does not have chapters in his book, and it drives me bonkers. Because, hello, when are you supposed to set the book down and go to sleep? You can't, because there are no chapters. Yeah, that's how I feel about that.
That's interesting. Over the last couple of years, as I've kind of gotten more attuned to crafty things, certainly, the rise and fall of each chapter, making sure that it hits the points and then gets out. And when do you start the chapter? I was notorious for a long time at starting the book and the chapters in the wrong spot, rather than getting
as a writer.
Yes. As a reader, I didn't start the book like on chapter 5 or something, because that would be weird. But it's interesting how there are people who love the longer books and people who like the shorter books. Does your like of short translate much to short stories? And novellas?
Here's the thing. There is not a lot of short fiction in the romance genre. Simply because I think we have moved away from that form. It's become less popular over the years, and there really isn't any way to publish short stories or get those out in public. Now, of course, independent authors can publish short stories whenever they want on the Kindle. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how long your book, if it's 5 pages or 100,000 pages, it doesn't matter in an ebook.
Yeah, as long as it's priced right.
But I think when it comes to certainly genre romance, I think the short story is a difficult sell for most readers because there's not enough time for the reader to kind of empathize with the character and their emotional journey, whatever that means for a romance in a short story. Now, novellas are, of course, another thing entirely. Novellas are, of course, very, very popular. In fact, I read nothing but novellas for 2 months straight during the holidays. That's all I did. I read Christmas novellas, and I loved every second of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the Christmas novellas. I like short stories when they're done well, and it is hard. I think it's hard as an author. Speaking for myself, it's hard to do something in a more compact area unless you're writing kind of an in-between story that connects into a series. Mm-hmm. So you could take that little episode and have a moment with it. But to have a whole... People who can do a romance in 5,000 words, I'm like, wow.
Yeah, that's really difficult. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, and kudos to you if you're an author who does that and pulls it off. Yeah. So yeah, you're much more on the side of the short read, and I'll pretty much read anything if it sucks me into it. Especially now with audiobooks, I'm happy to spend the time on an audiobook and have it go long and be worth the payoff. It's easier when it's in my ears, I think, to do. So yeah, anything else you want to say about short versus epic?
That our book, The Hockey Player's Heart, is the perfect length.
54,000 words. So it's right there in that short read just above a novella, right at the edge of novel. I think that's what you'd kind of call it, like skates that edge. Because also depends on what your definition of novel versus novella is, which some people move those numbers around depending on who they are. And tonight we thought we'd talk about doing a small town setting. Caleb Carter and Aaron Price both grew up in a small town in upstate New York. We kind of dropped this town up there near Albany, just as a nice place. So it's kind of near a town, but a bigger town, but it's also still kind of distant, and it's got its own little vibe to it. And some of we watch a lot of Hallmark movies. Let's just put that out there, and almost all of them take place in a quaint little town. And certainly one of my favorite shows is The Gilmore Girls, which is also in that little idyllic Stars Hollow setting. And there's something appealing about that to me. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What's your take on small town romance? As a setting?
I think as a setting, it works exceptionally well for contemporary romances. Especially if you want to imbue the story with, like you said, like a certain quaintness, mm-hmm. a certain bucolic quality. You can do a lot of different stuff with a fictional small town, and it adds an air of coziness. If you set it in a big city, say Manhattan or San Francisco, that's of course going to affect the feel of the story, and you've got something else, entirely different. So in this case, in The Hockey Player's Heart, we came up with the fictional New England town of Foster Grove, and it is essentially our cutesy version of Stars Hollow. It's populated with a lot of secondary characters that are going to be making appearances throughout the 3-book series. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that small town romances can offer. The chance to populate your story with quaint, quirky secondary characters who in most cases have known your main characters for a long time. Mm-hmm. So they can, from a craft point of view for the author, they can sort of be... What am I trying to say? Instead of like doing an info dump, you can have a secondary character at the diner. Ask your main character what they've been up to since they've moved back to town, or things like that. And
conversely, that same character can give the info dump on. Well, I remember when so and so was 10 and they did blah blah blah.
Yeah.
There's ways to convey information then that you don't have to do that info dump, mm-hmm. or keep it on somebody's head or something.
Right.
And it's also, I think it helps you maintain some proximity. You're certainly not getting a forced proximity like you would if you stuck them in a snowed-in cabin. But if you're hanging out in this tiny town, you can't put 100 blocks between them because there might only be 10 blocks in the entire town. And so there's a little more, everybody's seeing everybody's business mm-hmm. happening at the same time, as opposed to, having some distance where you may not even know your neighbor in some cases. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot of fun, and I think maybe eventually we'll do a contemporary romance that takes place in a bigger town. But certainly this trilogy all stays in tinier places for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think, as you were saying, it is a nice thing I think it works well for category romance, especially in particular too, where it's all that tropey kind of fuzzy goodness, because who doesn't want to go to a Stars Hollow and hang out at the Dragonfly or something? And they don't do that kind of thing in this book, but they could have. Yes, it's exciting that the book is finally out there in the wild. As we said, thanks to everybody who's picked it up, whether you're a Dreamspun subscriber or you've taken the chance to grab this book in pre-order. We hope you enjoy it, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Mm-hmm. Definitely leave reviews. As much as authors are told not to look at reviews, I do look at them. I check to see what people thought, just because...
Naughty author.
I know I'm a naughty author. I don't ever respond to them. I might hit like if it's on Goodreads or something to let you know that I've seen it. But we'd love to know your general opinion, the star rating and what you thought of Caleb and Aaron. It's good to know. Now, we got kind of a special treat tonight because this one's going to do his very first reading. So he's going to read actually from the prologue of the book to give you your first little sample of Caleb and Aaron. So take it away and give us a reading.
Give you a reading. Okay,
Yeah.
so I am going to be reading the first couple of pages, the prologue of The Hockey Player's Heart. This book is about a professional hockey player named Caleb Carter, and he is recovering from an injury. He is the star player, the captain of the Rangers, and so he lives and works in New York City. But in order to escape some of the paparazzi and some of the pressure that's surrounding him about his rehab and recovery, he goes back to his small town in upstate New York, and he reconnects with someone from his past.
Yes.
A guy named Aaron, who has also recently moved back to Foster Grove, and he is currently a grade school teacher. Now, the prologue came later. Originally, during the first draft of this book, we did not have a prologue. And as we were working through the draft and kind of thinking about the story arc, I think I was the one who suggested that we have a prologue. And I really felt that we needed to see Caleb and Aaron before the present day when the bulk of the book takes place. I think we needed to get a concrete idea of their relationship and their connection in their past so that we could better understand what they're working towards in the future. So there you have it.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten that the prologue had come later, but you're right. One day, as you were going through the first draft, you're like, I think this needs a prologue, and that became my mission to go and write the prologue as kind of a retro moment in all of it, because I tend to write front to back, and now I was going way back since this happens about a decade before the bulk of the material in the book.
Yeah, I think when you start going over a manuscript, you kind of you begin to have a clearer idea of some of what it's all about and what are the kind of underlying themes, and then you come up with ways in order to sort of strengthen or underline certain ideas that you want to kind of get across to the reader.
And actually, your idea of the prologue gave us a couple of really nice moments later in the book too that we worked in. So.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The prologue, it was a really great idea, guys.
So now, without further ado,
here's
Will reading the prologue.
Here's the prologue from The Hockey Player's Heart. In his 2 years on the Foster Grove High hockey team, Caleb Carter had faced off against some of the biggest and baddest players in the state of New York. But nothing he'd ever encountered on the ice could prepare him for what he was about to do. Alone in his bedroom, Caleb tried to control the sudden sickening panic that gripped him. Why was he freaking out so bad? Because he had zero experience talking to guys the way he wanted to talk to Aaron tonight. Practicing the positive visualization technique that Coach had taught him, Caleb inhaled deeply, gulping down what should have been a calming breath. He glanced at the digital clock on his bedside table and knew he'd wasted enough time. It was now or never. He reached for the doorknob, then paused, brought his hand to his face, and breathed into his palm. Deeming his breath acceptable, he headed downstairs. Caleb stopped on the stairway landing and peered through the railing at everyone assembling in his family's living room. Balloons and a giant banner hung above the fireplace mantel. Only a few pieces of the graduation cake his mom had made were left. Earlier that afternoon, Caleb and about a dozen members of his extended family had sat in the bleachers at the high school's football stadium and watched his older sister Pam and her best friend Aaron Price graduate with honors. The ceremony seemed to go on forever, but when Pam took the stage in the middle of the field and gave her valedictorian speech, even he had to admit it was pretty inspiring. Afterward, everyone came back to the Carter home for a joint family graduation party. Caleb had hoped to find a moment to talk to Aaron alone, but Aaron and Pam dealt with a seemingly endless array of relatives. Each one had to congratulate them and discuss college plans and for their respective futures. Aaron now stood at the bottom of the stairs, laughing at something his uncle was saying. When the older man eventually turned away, Caleb called down, "Hey, Aaron, do you have a second?" "Sure," he answered before bounding up the steps to where Caleb stood. "What's up?" Can I talk to you?" Caleb asked, gesturing for Aaron to follow him into his room. At the end of the hallway, music blared from behind Pam's bedroom door. Pam had escaped the party to change out of her dress. She and Aaron would be leaving soon for the safe and sober grad night party. Aaron stood expectantly in the middle of Caleb's room, hand in his pockets of his dress pants. He wore a nice button-down shirt and tie, his dark hair combed neatly and parted on the side. Caleb thought he looked great. "You okay? You've been acting strange all afternoon," Aaron said. Caleb's mouth went dry. He tried to casually shrug off the question, but all that came out of his mouth was an aborted squeak. He had to get a grip. This was Aaron, his sister's best friend. He had to be cool. "So, I got you something." "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." Caleb went to his desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a brown paper bag. "Something to say thank you. Sorry I wasn't able to get it wrapped. We only had Christmas paper and that seemed weird." Aaron took the package Caleb offered and looked inside. A huge smile spread across his face, and it warmed Caleb far more than he expected. Aaron removed a small trophy from the bag. It was a cup with handles on either side. The wood base had a gold plaque that read, "Aaron Price, World's Best Tutor." Caleb had bought it at the pro shop located next to the ice rink where he practiced every morning. He even spent the extra money to have it especially engraved. "I wouldn't have made it through geometry without you, and if I'd flunked, I'd be off the team. You're the one who did the work. But you spent all those hours helping me, drilling into this thick skull of mine." "Caleb, I wish you wouldn't say things like that. You're a lot smarter than you give yourself credit for." "Anyway, you're the reason I know the difference between equilateral and isosceles triangles. I wanted to give you something to show you how much I appreciate it. You're a seriously good teacher." Aaron held the little trophy up, admiring it, turning it so it glinted in the late afternoon light that shone through the bedroom window. "I love it." Before he could second-guess himself, Caleb stepped toward Aaron and gave him a hug. He intended it for it to be a quick embrace, a clap on the back, but to Caleb's surprise, Aaron wrapped his arms around him and didn't let go. Time seemed to momentarily stop. He wanted to squeeze Aaron and hold on tight, but fear threatened to overwhelm him. His stomach somersaulted, and he didn't want Aaron to get the wrong idea. Caleb needed to let go, but he liked the warm feeling of Aaron's body underneath that dress shirt. What was happening? A moment later, Aaron began to pull back. As Caleb stepped away, without thinking, he turned his head a fraction of an inch and brushed his lips across Aaron's cheek. And Caleb immediately jumped back, his face burning hot with embarrassment. "So, yeah, thanks. For the tutoring, I mean," he blurted out. "You really helped me a lot." "You're welcome. I'm glad I could," Aaron smiled, his eyes warm and kind. He absently pushed his glasses back up the bridge of his nose. If he felt any of the awkwardness Caleb did, he didn't let on. There was a loud knock. Caleb glanced over his shoulder as Pam opened the door and poked her head in. "Come on, Aaron, we need to get going." She disappeared down the hall, leaving his door open. "We'll be right there." With the little trophy in his hand, Aaron turned to leave, but paused briefly in the doorway. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest as he waited expectantly for Aaron to do something, say anything. The moment stretched out for what felt like an eternity. It had taken every ounce of courage Caleb had to give Aaron that trophy. If he gave the gift back, Caleb knew he would literally die of embarrassment. "Thank you, Caleb," he finally said. "I'll see you later." Caleb stood by himself and listened to Aaron's footsteps as he returned downstairs to join Pam and take her to the after-hours grad night party. Caleb unconsciously brought his fingertips to his lips. Had he really just done that? Had his lips actually touched the skin of another guy? Caleb had kissed Aaron Price. He'd never been so happy in his life.
And there you have it, the prologue of The Hockey Player's Heart. We hope you enjoyed that. We hope you enjoyed the book. And whether this has been your first visit to our Facebook videos or if you've been here every night, we thank you for joining us and hope you've enjoyed these little sneak peeks behind the scenes of our book. If you haven't seen the blog tour stops for today, we were at 3 places earlier today.
We were busy.
We were busy people. Joyfully Jay, Scattered Thoughts and Rogue Words, and Happily Ever Chapter on Facebook each have a tour stop, along with the Rafflecopter with the question of the day, so you can get entries to win ebooks or the autographed paperback, or if you're an international grand prize winner, a $10 e-gift card. The blog tour will continue through January 25th, and you can check the whole schedule out at jeffadamswrites.com. If you have not been following along so far. Again, thank you for hanging out with us. Hope you enjoyed the book, and we will see you later. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
For detailed show notes and the complete episode backlist, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday on all major podcast distributors and YouTube. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.